Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 8. In here, if anyone wants to repeat, go for it. Jayotana Padasya Suniti Suruchistayo Suruchi Preyasi Patyur Netarayat Suto Dhruva. So word for word, Jaye of the two wives, Uttanapadasya of King Uttanapad, Suniti, Suniti, Suruchi, Suruchi, Tayo of both of them, Suruchi, Suruchi, Preyasi, very dear, Patu, of the husband, Na Itara, not the other, Yat, who, Suta, son, Dhruva, Dhruva. Translation. King Uttanapad had two queens named Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite. Now, this purport is really amazing. You know those purports where you're like, wow, Prabhupada's really kind of, we hear that Prabhupada's sharing his devotional ecstasies during his purports. Well, here he is, he's giving us a glimpse. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great sage Maitreya wanted to describe the pious activities of the kings. Priyavrata was the first son of Swayambhuva Manu, and Uttanapad was the second. But the great sage Maitreya immediately began to speak of Dhruva Maharaj, the son of Uttanapad, because Maitreya was very eager to describe pious activities. The incidents in the life of Dhruva Maharaj are very attractive for devotees. From his pious actions, one can learn how one can detach himself from material possessions and how one can enhance one's devotional service by severe austerities and penances. By hearing the activities of pious Dhruva, one can enhance one's faith in God and can directly connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus, one can very soon be elevated to the transcendental platform of devotional service. The example of Dhruva Maharaja's austerities can immediately generate a feeling of devotional service in the hearts of the hearers. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umritam Yena Tasmai Shri Nivay Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the two verses again. Swayambhuva Manu had two sons by his wife Shatarupa, and the names of the sons were Uttanapad and Priyavrata. Because both of them were descendants of a plenary expansion of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were very competent to rule the universe, to maintain and protect the citizens. King Uttanapad had two queens named Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite. So I'm going to focus more on the second verse. But the first one, it's giving the important point about how when you're a leader, the whole point is to maintain and protect the citizens. So that could be a whole nother topic that comes up a lot in Bhagavatam. So that can be for another day for another person. But I really wanted to focus on this second verse and purport because there's so much in that purport. It seems like, in our culture, we have Krishna reveals to Lord Brahma the Chatur Shloki in the heart, and then Lord Brahma expands it. And then we have, after the expansion of different devotees, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam. Although the Srimad Bhagavatam is eternal, it expanding, you know, because then another devotee gives their commentary and like that. So we're always unpacking, expanding on Shastra, on bhakti. And so we see how Prabhupada started the tradition, or maybe it already happens in the Gaudiya Mata, I'm not sure, but at least we're given one verse and a purport or two this today, and we're supposed to expand in a whole class on this purport. And Prabhupada's expanding from the verse in the purport, you know, so we're always unpacking. First of all, the thing that struck me is that Prabhupada's mentioning that Maitreya, he's so eager to describe the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj that he went first to Uttanapad instead of Priyavrata, although Priyavrata is the first son, so it would make sense that you talk about the first son first and then the second. But because he just wanted to glorify Dhruva Maharaj, he jumped to this pastime. And it gives us a bit of a glimpse of that it's actually a conversation, you know, it's not like this first, this second, you know, like very do, but it's a flow, and it's based on rasa. And so they're relishing what they're talking about. So that's kind of an indicative for us that that's the mood that we should have when we're approaching Bhagavatam. My Guru Maharaj says, in the beginning it's therapeutic, and after we become more advanced, actually that's when we relish. So maybe I'm still in the therapeutic stage, but it's nice to have a glimpse. I was just meditating on, or remembering that recently it was a very dear friend of mine's birthday. And you know, sometimes in birthdays we go around in a circle and we glorify that devotee and for their amazing qualities. And it's just the mood is so sweet, and it's an atmosphere, it creates an atmosphere of love, and it's very pleasing to the heart. So in the same way, Maitreya, you know, is showing us that he's relishing talking about the glories of Dhruva Maharaj. So that's the first point that struck me. And then we hear in the purport that Prabhupada's saying that Dhruva's austerities generate a feeling of devotional service in our hearts. Let me read the exact. Where is it? One can enhance one's devotional service by severe austerities and penances. From his pious actions, one can learn to detach himself from material possessions. So I was thinking, why is it that it generates a feeling of devotion in our heart to hear about Dhruva Maharaj's austerities? And I was thinking, because he went through a transformation. He approached with material motives, and through the process of bhakti, he developed love for Krishna. And so then that gives us hope, right? At least that's where I'm at, you know, that famous verse, Akama, Sarvakama, Moksha Kama, in the second canto. So Sarvakama, at least that's where I'm at. Lots of material desires, but devotional service will purify us, will transform us. And so Prabhupada says, it's an inspiring lila for us as devotees, because it increases our faith. He says it enhances our faith. I can also be transformed. There's hope for me if I just, you know, dedicate myself like Dhruva Maharaj. And the other point that Prabhupada's saying is that by hearing the activities of pious Dhruva, one can enhance one's faith in Krishna and God, and one can directly connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus one can very soon be elevated to the transcendental platform of devotional service. So this Prabhupada is telling us, you know, the Bhagavatam isn't a book, it's an incarnation of Krishna. It's Krishna's literary incarnation, it's Krishna himself. And we're directly connecting with Krishna when we're absorbed in hearing the Bhagavatam. So it's so true, and you probably all have experience of that. So this pastime we're starting to enter into, Prabhupada's telling us that we can learn a lot from it, from all the pastimes in Bhagavatam. But he actually says, he uses the word learn somewhere. Anyways, I can't find it now, but I remember it's like we've got lots of lessons in each pastime. And I was just trying to think of why this pastime is so popular. And I was remembering how Mother Urmila, she says that she I don't know if she still is, but she was an editor in Back to Godhead magazine for many, many years, decades. And the most popular section of Back to Godhead is, she calls it the hick, how I came to Krishna consciousness. Everyone's interested in the backstory, how they became a devotee. So it's just fascinating to hear, what happened. How did it go about? What was we called it in Bhakti Shastri the mercy map. So here we hear this is Dhruva's pastime, how he became a devotee. This something happened to him that could seem like it was negative, but it wasn't. We'll get into that soon. Yeah, and so it's also, I was thinking about how even for devotees, when we're, for example, at the loft, or when we meet someone that is thinking about maybe becoming a devotee or is very new, they usually ask you, look, so how long have you been doing this? And how did you start this? How did you become a devotee? So then you tell your story, and people are intrigued by that. What made you change? What made you what sparked your love for Krishna, basically. So here we'll hear in the next classes how Dhruva Maharaj, the whole pastime, which is very interesting because it's a story. Another point that Mother Urmila makes a lot is that we learn through storytelling the most. And why is that? Because our false ego is really strong, or at least mine. And if someone tells me, you must surrender to the Almighty God, whatever, I'll be like, what? Why are you forcing me? Like, wait a minute, I have my own independence. I can choose what I want to do. Whatever. That's why I'm in the material world. But so my false ego is like on edge if someone's like, forcing me and telling me what to do. But in stories, the way the effect they have on the hearers, on the people, be it kids, children, or adults, is that we let our guards down. Our false ego relaxes, goes to sleep, and then we can hear the lessons that are in the story without being, kind of provoked. So it's really important. And it's amazing that the Bhagavatam is a book of stories, and that's how we learn the best. So given these two things about the Dhruva Leela, now let's go to a few lessons, just a few, because there's probably a lot more that Prabhupada wants us to focus on. The third one is the one that he specifically mentions in this purport, but the first two that I've been thinking about recently, these past days. And I was talking with a friend of mine about how I can't understand how there can be so much evil in people's hearts. Like, I don't understand the psychology of someone that wants to cause harm in another. And she said, well, all of us do that to certain degrees. There's some do more than others, but it's just different degrees. But for in the material world, we are causing harm to others. And I was thinking, yeah, but still, like, why is it that some people are so evil? Like, you hear about things happening in the world, and then I was reading a bit ahead in this chapter, and I came across the part where Suniti is talking with Dhruva Maharaj, and she tells him This is in verse 17. She also was breathing very heavily, and she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pain upon others suffers himself from that pain." So this lesson is crucial for everyone. And this is what should be, taught as parents to our children in schools all over the world, to understand that if you harm someone, you're going to have to suffer from that pain. And that should be completely internalized, so that is our guiding principle. I don't want to suffer. So why am I going to make someone else suffer? So the thing is that, it's the law of karma, and it's people say, oh yeah, karma, but do they actually live by the law of karma? Do we? So it's that ignorance that you don't actually, someone that's really causing a lot of pain in someone else, they don't actually understand that they're going to have to suffer that in the future. It's out of ignorance. And as we know in the beginning of Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, ignorance is the cause of suffering. So that is a huge lesson in and of itself. That is, that is just one verse in the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, but it's such an important point, that if only everyone understood how karma works, and that if we hurt others, we're going to have to suffer that pain ourselves, then this world wouldn't be the way it is, because no one wants to suffer. Anyways, that's one lesson. The second lesson that I was also thinking about is that I mentioned it a little bit before, that we take that Dhruva Maharaj is showing us how to take everything as Krishna's mercy, even what seems to be something negative, like an insult from his stepmother. It's everything can be taken as a blessing in disguise. And because I was the way I remembered the pastime is I thought that Suniti told Dhruva Maharaj to go to the forest, but actually it was Suruchi. I don't know if everyone remembers that. Let's see if I can find it. Well, not to go to the forest, but she says, if you at all desire to rise to the throne of the king, then you have to undergo severe austerities. First of all, you must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. So she's telling him, if you want something, go to Krishna. So that's the blessing in disguise. She's giving him, the impetus to approach Krishna for everything. And of course, when we approach Krishna, we usually have, we're one of those 4 categories, so we're not pure devotees when we approach Krishna. So yeah, so she's the one that kind of inserts that into Dhruva's life. If you want this, go to Krishna. Whatever you want, go to Krishna. And then through the process of worshiping Krishna, we get purified and we won't want that anymore, which is what happened. That transformation happened with Dhruva Maharaj. And the last lesson that I wanted to just touch upon today is the one that's in the purport, which I find a bit hard as a wannabe, enjoyer in the material world. Srila Prabhupada says that we should learn how to be detached from material possessions, and in that way, by severe austerities, we can increase our devotional service. And I was thinking, okay, Dhruva Maharaj, he left everything and he went to the forest. And what did he do in the forest? So he fasted. And so for us, what would be our severe austerity? Krishna Prabhupada's so kind and merciful that he's given us Ekadasi as our austerity and taking only prasadam. So that's how I would kind of identify with Dhruva Maharaj fasting, because I don't think I could just live off roots in the forest or just water or just breathe, become a breatharian. And then what else did he do? He was chanting the mantra that his Guru Maharaj gave him. And so we also chant the Maha Mantra. That's our sadhana. We hear, Bhagavatam. So that's another thing that we can, take as the example of Dhruva Maharaj. And lastly, I was thinking that he was meditating on Vishnu 24/7. He was completely absorbed. His mind was completely absorbed. His eyes were closed, right? Because that's when he couldn't see Vishnu in his heart anymore. So he opened his eyes and he saw Vishnu. So this is something that I've been trying. I can try harder, but I've been trying a little bit to absorb my mind on Krishna 24/7 and see everything around me. Like now the sun is rising. Exactly at this point, I can see the sun coming out. So we know that Krishna, he's the light of the sun. And this morning, I was putting some, what do you call it? It came out of turmeric into my milk, and I had turmeric in my fingers, and I was remembering the pastime of Pili Poker, which is one of my favorite leelas, where Mother Yashoda is putting turmeric in Radharani's hands because she wants Radharani to marry Krishna in that yellow lake in Varshana. So everything can remind us of Krishna during the day. And Mother Amla really says that that's really important for us to practice, trying to connect everything around us to Krishna. And that's why Krishna gives us all those opulences in the Bhagavad-Gita, so that we can think of him. Yesterday, I went to the beach with my kids and I was telling Naya, Krishna's the ocean, and just trying to connect everything with Krishna and remember Krishna constantly. And so on this point, I've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to see if I can find my Bhagavad-Gita. One second. Yes. So, as you all know, there's only one verse that's repeated twice, almost the same, in the Bhagavad-Gita, in the 9th chapter and in the 18th chapter. And it's one of my favorite verses. And the purport is amazing, and we can meditate on it today. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mamevasyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. And Krishna says to all of us, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. And the purport is so nice. The most confidential part of knowledge is that one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him and act for him. One should not become an official meditator. Life should be so molded that one will always have the chance to think of Krishna. One should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. He should arrange his life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours, he cannot but think of Krishna. That's amazing. And the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness will certainly return to the abode of Krishna, where he will be engaged in the association of Krishna face to face. This most confidential part of knowledge is spoken to Arjuna because he is the dear friend of Krishna. Everyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a dear friend to Krishna and obtain the same perfection as Arjuna. And then, just to finish off, these words stress that one should concentrate his mind upon Krishna, the very form with 2 hands carrying a flute, the bluish boy with a beautiful face and peacock feathers in his hair. That's the picture I have that my husband has in the back on the wall. Yeah. Concentration of the mind on the form of Krishna constitutes the most confidential part of knowledge, and this is disclosed to Arjuna because Arjuna is the most dear friend of Krishna's. So if we also want to become a dear friend of Krishna's. He's giving us a bit of an insight that we should just try to connect with him all day, every day, as much as we can. And it's a practice, and that's why we're in sadhana bhakti, or I am. So all glories to Dhruva Maharaj, all glories to Srila Prabhupada for giving us an insight into the heart of a devotee. And yeah, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Got a few minutes. Any one of my comments or any queries? Okay. So there being none, we'll close the class here. Thank you very much, Madhuji, for your association. Very wonderful class. We'd like to see you more often. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Madhuryamrita Mataji ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakti Vanchakar Padravesha, Kipasana Vesha, Pavani View, Krishna View, Gaur Bhakti jai.